guest columns that we have running. For the most part, you can ignore, well, for all of you, you can ignore and then Cisco's name at the top. We're having some blog difficulties with the paper. The names of the authors are actually at the end of it and not at the top. There's one July 2nd, 2009, Louisiana Poster Child for Healthcare Reform. I mentioned earlier, just beginning with an anecdote. There are issues that are really big issues. Clearly, healthcare reform is such an issue. But what's notable is this piece is written by Dr. Elmore Riggin. He begins with a single person. This week I learned of a medical school applicant who did not get health insurance because 2 years ago he had a mole on his neck that was thought to be a melanoma. That's going to draw a reader in. It's a very specific person. He knows of this person in particular, and it's not some big abstract concept. This is one person and how this person is doing. Next paragraph. Then I heard from an employee of a small restaurant who was concerned that his seriously ill child's medical expenses would increase his group's insurance premiums to the point where some of his colleagues would have to try coverage. Example, again, just very clear sentences. There's nothing jargony about them. There's nothing technical here about the language. This is a person speaking in plain and clear language in a way that everybody is going to understand. Okay. There's another piece, June 29th, point of view, City Hall, not just a place, but a state. Here you have Bishop Campanella and architect John Cooney writing about what was in Mayor Ray Nagin's idea of using the Chevron building, I think it was, to build a new city hall. And this is a history of the city halls that are in New Orleans, but also a history of, or an explanation of what city hall has come to represent for many people. And I thought it was a very clear, engaging piece that took history and this idea of the public square and made a very concise argument about what New Orleans should or should not have. So you have here, the statements and the history of these are the buildings we had before, and this is why we don't think that the sheriff. Lisa, who introduced me, had a piece published, was it just Marshall? Yeah. And I like this piece. And because you're in public health, I would suggest that you read this one in particular, because it is an example of somebody in public health just having recently had a piece published. And she talked about, we talked just a few minutes ago before this lecture began, about the difficulties she did have to write. Maybe in a few minutes we can talk about that if you like. But it can be done. And your first draft probably isn't going to cut it. So just know that it is difficult. Again, it's supposed to be. And you can't just keep working on it. And if we are interested in your piece and we think that it has merit, there will be a real willingness on our end to help you edit it and shape it in a way that makes it work to the general public. But again, all the things that we said earlier, just for the most part, to make sure that you understand that these are people with a general interest in information and knowledge, and not necessarily feelings a hunger or a thirst for the information that you want to provide them. And so, if you approach it in that way, and approach it not as a paper that you're reading at a conference, and not as an attempt to impress some particular person with your intellect, but just a desire to say, this is information that you need to know. It's important to have healthy fruits and vegetables available throughout every neighborhood in New Orleans, and this is how we might achieve this particular thing. You know, the way Lisa wrote this for the newspaper is probably not going to be the way that she writes it if she's at a conference and making some type of presentation, because our audience is let me shut up. I feel like I've talked for a while, and you may have some questions about anything related to writing and getting published, anything I've said or any of the questions I've raised. Yes.
This might be clear by looking online, but what's the process like of submitting something, and like what's the time frame, I guess?
Yeah, you can usually just write us either at, I can't remember the address anymore. Sometimes it's letters at Times-Picayune. But let's see. If you just email letters at Times-Picayune.com with your question, or just say that you have a potential opinion piece that you would like to submit, one of us will respond to you.
Okay.
Yeah. As for timeline, it depends. If it's timely, then that serves you well. If it can hold, it might be held for a little while.
Okay.
But we generally like to get pieces published as quickly as we can. Yes.
What level of passion is acceptable in an opinion piece? So I'm imagining if you sit down to write this piece, it's something that you really feel strong about or strongly about. And so, you know, I'm sure that you look at some of these, what can you, knowing that they're supposed to be objective pieces?
Well, they're not.
No.
They're not. I mean, if they're opinion pieces.
Trying to look objective, and how much passion of your own can you actually put in your writing style?
Are you asking me in particular, or people in general?
Just in general. Like
Well,
well,
it is rare that a piece will not be published because it's too passionate on the op-ed page. No, seriously, I mean, that is, people go there because they, in many ways, because they want to be moved.
sometimes your language is very passionate. You understand?
Yes.
You can push a point forward. Like this is a piece, of course, in support of healthy foods
Correct.
in African American communities, but it's not necessarily passion. It's not like it's trying to get at some of your readers' emotion on top.
Correct.
Do you have a lot of people who submit opinion pieces that are like that, pulling on emotion?
Yeah. And like I said, it does not disqualify them at all. In fact, it argues for its publication if it will move the reader in a certain way. You know, the greatest offense is being dull. I mean, seriously. And because this is the opinions page, objectivity is not the aim. Objectivity, to the extent it exists at all, is of the news stories and the news side. When we're talking about an opinion piece in my bed, you are expected to take a side on the issue. If you're submitting on the one hand, but on the other hand type piece, you can just keep it because that's not taking a position. I mean, so you know the whole point of the page is advocacy. The whole point of the page is I'm pushing for this particular plan. You know, people responding to columns I've written all the time say, well, you're just biased. Well, I'm not supposed to take both sides. I'm writing an opinion. I'm writing my opinion about this. I feel one way about this, and I feel strongly about it. Why would I take the other side if I feel this particular way? My opinion is the point. That's why I'm writing this, you know. So don't worry about that. If it's too hot, we'll help you cool it down. But rarely is anybody submitting anything that's too hot. Honestly, it's much more likely that the opposite is submitted to us. That somebody has written something that's devoid of any type of life whatsoever. And so that's, we won't even consider publishing that. Definitely go. So don't worry about it. We will welcome something that's passionate. Yes.
Following up on, I guess, the objectivity theme, you know, oftentimes with letters to the editor, people will write in and say, you know, I completely disagree with what the Times-Picayune said on this, or I completely agree with it. And I was just curious as to if there's sort of a weighting of, you know, the agrees and disagrees when it comes to picking those kinds of things.
Well, we like to publish letters of people who don't agree with us. So if there's any bias, ironically, is toward publishing those letters where people are taking that to task. Because to publish all at once to say how great we are just looks bad. But I actually love the time when you write. You all are awful and you all are great, like right next to each other. You can be in the same position, how awful we were to say this or how right we were to say this. But yeah, we do often publish. We try to give, because we are the big bad press. We do have the barrels of ink, right? And so if you're writing something, especially something that has, ticked somebody off in some way, it seems more responsible to publish more people who are in disagreement with you, because you've already had your say in.
To kind of expand on that, she really covered a good point that I was about to bring up, but if you could go a little deeper, because this is a public health crowd, I work for a local nonprofit, we deal in public health policy, and often, you know, we find that different regions across the state, different newspapers are with us, they're against us. For example, smoke-free air laws, you know, just depending on what position a particular paper takes, we find it hard to schedule, you know, editorial board visits, they don't really want to see us or whatever. By the same token, they're less likely to print an op-ed because as a policy, it affects the masses versus controversial issues that never really, they just kind of get spun in zeitgeist, you know what I mean? So can you kind of speak a little bit more about
Well, let me just say that I can't speak for any other newspapers, but I know that, you know, there are a lot of people who think that their ability to get a meeting is suggests whether or not their issue is particularly supported or not. Honestly, we just hate meeting with anybody. Seriously, I'm being very honest with you.
No, that's good to
You
hear.
know,
No, that's good to hear.
we just hate meetings in general, and you all probably do too. So don't take that any way or the other. For us, I don't know about the other newspapers, but a responsible editor, a responsible opinions page wants to have a broad impact, wants many voices on the pages that are published. So it's a little disappointing to hear that maybe there are newspapers out there that won't publish certain things because they don't agree with that. I think that's really bad. I think that does the readers a disservice. And I think one of the things that I haven't done it as thoroughly as I said I was going to do it. But one of the things I told myself just recently I was going to do was try to read 10 columns every day, just for me. And I need to make this clear. It's not just the people I agree with, but the people I disagree with as well. Because I think it's very important to read what other people are saying. Because there are people whose opinions I almost never agree with. I think they're great writers. And they write good columns. I just don't like what they're saying, but I kind of like how they say it. So my natural tendency is for as many voices as possible. And I know that in general, we wanted to have as many voices as we can. So I can understand the frustration that you're expressing about not being able to get some pieces in. Consider that it might, I don't know, consider that it might be the quality of the writing, consider that it might be space limitations, consider if somebody, if a newspaper, you know, publishes opinions that are, you know, contrary to what you're submitting, and then doesn't want to publish a similar piece that's a similar size piece taking the opposite side, then that would be probably a red flag. Again, if it's in response to that, though, it would be a letter, as I said. If you're responding to somebody else's op-ed, that would be a letter. So I don't know. I can't speak to anybody else's editorial decisions, but they're sometimes a little more complex than people on the outside of my But again, it's not rocket science. It really isn't. You know, what we are wanting to do as a newspaper and on the op-ed page, letters page in particular, is to keep the readers engaged. And people like reading stuff that's going to engage them. I mean, it's as simple as that. They want the reading to be enjoyable. And if it isn't enjoyable, it's not going to be read. So, and it doesn't mean we have to, you know, sprinkle in exclamation points or anything. Please don't do that. But it is to say that, you know, you're trying to engage somebody that you don't know on a very readable level.
So if you know, tobacco-free living gets 20 people to write letters to the editor, and they all
No, it doesn't work at all.
You're just like,
We spot those campaigns. Letter writing campaigns are typically transparent, you know, and we do everything that we can to make sure that an opinion is being expressed by an individual and is not being by an organization. In the sense of, hey, let's get 15 people to all send the identical sounding or similar sounding pieces to newspapers. We can tend to spot those. One of the organizations that does that in some of the most ridiculous ways is PETA. You know, every Thanksgiving or every the people laugh. But every Thanksgiving we get letters about, you know, the parking of the White House turkey and all the turkeys that didn't get parking, and you know, and there was, I can't even remember how I wrote recently, a few years ago, but it was essentially somebody who clearly was sending out letters for PETA, and it was just a fraud, because we typically call to confirm authorship of a letter. And so we call this one particular number and ask for this particular name. And the person, it was some type of the way the person hesitated. And then they call to say, oh yes, I'm the person who wrote that letter. Right? So then we called back about 5 minutes later and asked if Jarvis DeBerry were there and had written the letter. And the person said yes, he was there, and he had written that letter. So again, we know how to spot your letter writing campaigns. So clearly people said, oh, well maybe we do have a Jarvis DeBerry on our list who's written a letter. So there are campaigns like that. And it's like, there are people in New Orleans who, if they want to write about how we shouldn't be eating turkey on Thanksgiving, are fully free to write about how we shouldn't be eating turkey on Thanksgiving. They don't need, you know, somebody in California pretending. I will say this, and this is something we often have to communicate to people who wonder why such and such hasn't been published. We get a lot more stuff submitted to us than we can possibly ever publish. You know, letters submitted to the editor, that probably is about 50 or 60 a day, and we can run about 5 or 6. So we can't publish everything. We can't even publish every good thing necessarily. So not everything is done. Just the nature of more demand.